The silver moonlight cut through the temple's broken roof like a blade, illuminating the woman kneeling on the cold stone floor. Seraphine's knees ached from hours of prayer, her thin dress offering no protection against the chill that seeped up from the ancient marble. "Please," she whispered for the 100th time that night, "Mother Moon, I beg you, set me free." Outside the crumbling temple walls, she could hear the distant sounds of celebration, music and laughter from Lord Malakar's estate, where her fate was being decided without her consent. Tomorrow, she would be sold. Not at a common auction block, but in the refined cruelty of noble bargaining. Lord Malakar had grown tired of her, the orphaned ward his household had been burdened with since her father's death. The debts her father left behind made her little more than property to be traded. Seraphine pressed her forehead to the stone, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "I'll do anything," she breathed. "Accept any fate. Just not this. Not him." He was Lord Varen, a man 3 times her age with cold eyes and a reputation that made servant girls disappear. He had offered the highest price for her hand, and Malakar had accepted without hesitation. The moonlight suddenly intensified, flooding the temple with silver brilliance. Seraphine gasped, raising her head. For a moment, just a moment, she could have sworn she saw a woman's figure in the light, ancient, beautiful, and terrifying. "Your prayer is heard, child. But freedom has many forms. Be careful what you wish for." The vision vanished. Seraphine blinked, her pulse racing. Had she imagined it? The exhaustion, the fear, the hunger. Perhaps her mind was breaking under the strain. A commotion outside shattered her thoughts. Shouts, the clash of steel, and then screams. Seraphine scrambled to her feet, pressing herself against the temple wall as the sounds of violence grew closer. The temple doors burst open. Men poured through, not Malakar's guards, but strangers in dark leather armor, moving with a predatory grace that made her blood freeze. Raiders. The northern territories had been restless for months, but no one believed they would strike this deep into the kingdom. Seraphine tried to run, but rough hands caught her arm and dragged her into the chaos outside. The village was burning. Malakar's estate was under siege, flames licking at the windows where moments ago nobles had been dancing. She was thrown to her knees in the courtyard, surrounded by other captured villagers. The raiders moved among them, separating the young from the old with brutal efficiency. "This one." A boot nudged her chin upward, forcing her to look at the man who had spoken. He was enormous, towering over the other raiders, with shoulders broad enough to block out the burning sky behind him. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and his eyes. Gods. His eyes were the color of molten amber, almost gold in the firelight. Crouched before her, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "What's your name?" His voice was deep, rough, accented in a way she couldn't place. Seraphine refused to answer, meeting his gaze with all the defiance she could muster. She would not cower. Not to Malakar, not to Varen, and not to this savage. Something flickered in those amber eyes. Surprise? Respect? "Brave," he murmured. "Foolish, but brave." He rose and turned to his men. "This one comes with me." "Kale." Another raider approached, his tone urgent. "We don't have time. The king's soldiers are half a day's march away. We need to take what we came for and go." The man called Kale didn't take his eyes off Seraphine. "Plans change." Before she could protest, she was lifted over his shoulder like a sack of grain. Seraphine screamed, kicked, clawed at his back, but he moved as if she weighed nothing, carrying her toward a massive black horse waiting at the edge of the burning village. "Let me go," she shrieked. "I'm nobody. I'm worth nothing to you." Kale paused, turning his head slightly. "You're wrong about that," he said quietly. Then he mounted the horse with her still struggling in his grip and spurred the beast into the darkness. They rode through the night. Seraphine fought until exhaustion claimed her, until her fists grew weak and her screams faded to whimpers. The man holding her said nothing, but at some point, his grip shifted from restraint to something almost protective, cradling her against his chest as the horse thundered north. When dawn began to bleed across the horizon, they reached a camp hidden in the foothills of the Valkyr Mountains. Tents stretched across a shallow valley, hundreds of them, and the people who emerged to greet the returning raiders were not the savages Seraphine had expected. There were women and children, elders tending cook fires, young men practicing with wooden swords. A community, a clan. Kyle dismounted, pulling her down with him. His men gathered around, speaking in that same strange accent, casting curious glances at her. "Take her to my tent," Kale ordered. "See that she's fed and given clean clothes. No one touches her. No one speaks to her. Is that clear?" The command in his voice was absolute. The men obeyed instantly. As Seraphine was led away, she looked back over her shoulder. Kale stood watching her, those amber eyes never wavering. And in that moment, with the rising sun turning his dark hair to bronze and the mountain wind whipping his cloak around him, she saw something that made her stumble. The other raiders were bowing. Not casually, but deeply. Reverently. The man who had stolen her from her burning village wasn't just a raider. He was their king. 3 days passed in Kale's tent, and Seraphine learned nothing. The space was surprisingly comfortable, thick furs covering the ground, a brazier that kept the mountain chill at bay, and meals that arrived 3 times daily, far better than anything Malachar had ever allowed her. But comfort meant nothing when she was still a prisoner. She paced the tent's confines like a caged animal, counting the steps, testing the canvas walls for weaknesses, and plotting escape routes that dissolved the moment she remembered she was surrounded by warriors in unfamiliar territory. The worst part was the silence. No one spoke to her, just as Kale had ordered. Servants brought food and water with downcast eyes. Guards changed shifts outside her tent without a word. She was drowning in questions with no one to answer them. Why had he taken her? What did a northern king want with a worthless ward? And why, when she closed her eyes at night, did she see those amber eyes burning in the darkness? On the 4th morning, the tent flap opened and Kale entered. Seraphine scrambled backward, pressing herself against the far canvas wall. He looked different in daylight, less like a demon from her nightmares and more like a man. A terrifyingly large man with a predator's grace, but a man nonetheless. He carried a bundle of fabric in his arms, which he set on the small table near the brazier. "You need proper clothes," he said without preamble. "The mountain winter is coming. That dress will kill you." "Then let me go home and it won't be your concern." Something tightened in his jaw. "You have no home." Malachar's estate burned to the ground. The man himself fled south with what remained of his gold. Seraphine felt the words like a physical blow. Burned. Gone. Not that she had loved that place, but it was the only world she knew. "And Lord Varen?" she heard herself ask. Kale's expression darkened. "Dead. He tried to fight when we came for the supplies. Fought poorly." He paused, studying her face. "You don't seem grieved." "He was going to buy me like livestock," Seraphine said flatly. "Forgive me if I don't mourn." Something shifted in his eyes. Surprise. Reassessment. "You were to be sold to him? Tomorrow, today, now." "I don't know anymore." Seraphine laughed bitterly. "I prayed to the moon goddess for freedom. I suppose this is her idea of a jest, trading one cage for another." Kale went very still. "What did you say?" "I said I prayed for—" "To whom?" Seraphine frowned at the intensity in his voice. "The moon goddess. The night you attacked, I was in her temple begging her to save me from that marriage." She shook her head. "Foolish. The gods don't answer prayers from nobodies." Kale stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he crossed the tent in 3 strides, moving so fast Seraphine barely had time to flinch before his hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face toward the light. "What are you doing?" she demanded, trying to pull away. Your eyes, he murmured. I thought it was a trick of the firelight, but they're truly silver. I've never seen that color before. Seraphine's pulse quickened. She had always hated her eyes. Too strange, too unsettling. Malachar had called them witch-marked and forbidden her from meeting the gazes of his noble guests. Let go of me, she whispered. Kale released her immediately, stepping back as if burned. Something like regret crossed his face. Forgive me. I forgot myself. He turned toward the tent flap, and Seraphine felt an inexplicable surge of panic at his leaving. Questions she hadn't meant to ask tumbled out. Why am I here? What do you want from me? Kale paused, his back still turned. I don't know yet. That's not an answer. He looked at her over his shoulder, and for just a moment, she saw something beneath the king's mask. Uncertainty, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. No, he agreed quietly. It isn't. Then he was gone, leaving Seraphine alone with more questions than before, and the lingering warmth of his touch still burning on her jaw. Over the following days, Seraphine earned small freedoms: permission to walk the camp under guard, to breathe fresh mountain air instead of the stuffy confines of the tent. Her guard was a young warrior named Tovin, barely older than she was, with kind eyes and a tendency to forget he wasn't supposed to speak to her. The healer's tent is over there, he said one afternoon, pointing to a large structure near the camp's center. Old Marin runs it. She's strict, but fair. Saved my brother's life after the Battle of Thornwood. Seraphine filed away every detail, building a map of the camp in her mind: the healing tent, the armory, the horse lines, the paths the patrols took. Then she saw the cage. It sat at the edge of camp, iron bars glinting dully in the pale sunlight. Inside, a figure huddled against the cold. A woman, Seraphine realized with a shock. A woman with matted dark hair and bruises visible even from a distance. Who is that? Seraphine demanded. Tovin's face closed off. Nobody. She's clearly somebody. Why is she caged like an animal? She's a traitor, Tovin said reluctantly. Ilara. She was one of us once, part of the inner circle. Then she sold information to the Southern King. Good people died because of her. Seraphine stared at the cage. The woman, Ilara, had raised her head, and their eyes met across the distance. Even from here, Seraphine could see the hollow desperation in her gaze. She knew that desperation. She had felt it kneeling on the temple floor, begging for any escape from her fate. That night, Seraphine couldn't sleep. She lay on the furs, staring at the tent's ceiling, thinking about cages, iron ones and invisible ones. A sound outside her tent made her freeze. Footsteps, too light to be a guard's patrol. Then a shadow passed across the canvas and the tent flap rustled. Seraphine sat up, pulse quickening. Kale slipped inside, silent as smoke. He was dressed simply, without the armor or weapons she usually saw him wearing. In the dim glow of the dying brazier, he looked almost vulnerable. You should be asleep, he said quietly. You should knock. Seraphine shot back, pulling the furs higher. What do you want? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved to the brazier and added fuel, coaxing the flames back to life. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, the scar that ran like a river of shadow down his cheek. I saw you today, he finally said, watching Ilara's cage. Seraphine's mouth went dry. Is that a crime? No, but the way you looked at her, like you recognized something in her. He turned to face her. Tell me about your prayer to the moon goddess. Every detail. It wasn't a request, but somehow it didn't feel like a command either. More like a plea. Seraphine found herself speaking before she could stop herself. The temple. The moonlight. The woman's voice that might have been a dream. Kale listened without interrupting, his expression growing more intense with each word. When she finished, silence stretched between them. What does it mean? Seraphine asked. Why do you care about my desperate prayers? Kale's hands curled into fists at his sides. Because among my people, the moon goddess isn't just a figure in old stories. She's real. She speaks to us. She chooses our fates. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. And she chooses our mates. The word hung in the air between them. Mates. I don't understand, Seraphine whispered. Kale stepped closer, and she could see the war raging behind his eyes, duty against desire, logic against something far more primal. Neither do I, he admitted. But since the moment I saw you in that burning village, something inside me recognized you. My wolf recognized you. Your wolf? He smiled then, but it was a bitter thing. There's much about my people you don't know, Seraphine. Much I should tell you. But not tonight. He retreated toward the tent flap. Tonight. Just know that you're not my prisoner. You never were. Then what am I? Kale looked back at her, and the raw honesty in his face stole her breath. I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. He vanished into the night, leaving Seraphine trembling among the firs with a single word echoing in her mind: mates. The next morning, everything changed. Seraphine woke to shouting, the thunder of hooves, and the acrid scent of smoke. She threw on the mountain clothes Kale had provided, soft leather breeches, a wool tunic, fur-lined boots, and burst from the tent into chaos. The camp was mobilizing for war. Warriors streamed toward the horse lines, strapping on armor as they ran. Women hurried children into the central tents, and above it all, Kale's voice cut through the noise, issuing commands in that strange northern tongue. Seraphine caught Tovin's arm as he rushed past. What's happening? Southern Army, he gasped. 3 legions, maybe more. They've crossed the Valkyr Pass. They'll be here by nightfall. 3 legions? Seraphine's blood went cold. That was thousands of soldiers. Can you fight that many? Tovin's jaw tightened. We'll die. Trying. He pulled away and ran toward the horse lines, leaving Seraphine standing in the middle of the churning camp. She should have been relieved. The Southern King's army had come. Her people. Her kingdom. They would rescue her from these northern savages, return her to civilization. So why did her chest ache at the thought of Kale riding into battle? Why did her feet carry her toward him before her mind could object? She found him near the command tent, surrounded by his war council. He looked every inch the king now, armor gleaming, a massive sword strapped to his back, his face carved from stone. When he saw her approaching, something flickered in his expression. Get her to the evacuation group, he told one of his lieutenants. She goes with the women and children to the mountain sanctuary. No. Seraphine pushed through the startled warriors until she stood before him. I'm not running. This isn't your fight. Then whose fight is it? She gestured at the camp around them. These people took me, yes, but they also fed me, clothed me, and kept me safe. I've seen the children playing in the meadows, the elders telling stories by the fire. Her voice cracked. They're not monsters, whatever the Southern King claims. Kale stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. You would stay? Risk your life for people you've known barely a fortnight? I would stay, Seraphine said, because I'm tired of running. Tired of being powerless while others decide my fate. She met his eyes, those depths that haunted her dreams. Let me help. There must be something I can do. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, so softly only she could hear, why do you make everything so complicated? Before she could answer, a horn blast shattered the air. One of the scouts came racing into camp on a lathered horse. They're not waiting for nightfall, he shouted. The legions are force marching. They'll reach us within the hour. Kale's expression hardened into battle readiness. He turned to his council, issuing rapid orders that sent warriors sprinting in all directions. When he looked at Seraphine again, his mask was firmly in place. Go to the healer's tent, he said. Old Marin will need help with the wounded. That's how you can serve. It wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to stay by his side, though she couldn't explain why. But she nodded. As she turned to go, his hand caught her wrist. Seraphine. She looked back. His thumb traced a small circle on her pulse point, and she felt the touch like fire through her entire body. Stay alive, he said roughly. Whatever happens, stay alive. Then he released her and strode toward his waiting army without looking back. Seraphine watched him go, her wrist still tingling, emotions she couldn't name flooding through her. Mates, he had said. She still didn't fully understand what that meant, but as she ran toward the healer's tent, she knew one thing with sudden, terrifying certainty. If Kale died today, something inside her would die with him. The battle began within the hour. Seraphine worked beside old Marin in the healer's tent, her hands quickly learning to clean wounds, apply poultices, and hold down screaming men, while the elderly healer set broken bones. The sounds of combat were distant at first, clashing steel, war cries, and the occasional boom that Marin called Southern fire powder. Then the wounded started arriving. They came in waves, carried by their brothers in arms, some walking under their own power despite horrific injuries. Seraphine lost track of time, lost track of herself. There was only the next patient, the next wound, the next life, hanging in the balance. You're a natural, Marin observed during a brief lull, her weathered face streaked with blood that wasn't her own. Most outsiders faint at their first battle aftermath. I've seen worse than blood, Seraphine replied grimly, thinking of the things Malachar had done to servants who displeased him. Violence doesn't shock me anymore. Marin gave her a long, measuring look. The king was right about you. Right about what? But before Marin could answer, the tent flap burst open and Tovin stumbled in, supported by two other warriors. His face was ashen, and his leg— gods, his leg was nearly severed below the knee. Marin! One of the warriors shouted. He needs you now. The healer rushed over, but Seraphine could see from her expression that the situation was grim. Tovin had lost too much blood. The wound was too severe. I can slow the bleeding, Marin said, but I can't save the leg. And if the wound festers, then he dies. The warrior's voice broke. He's my little brother. Please. Marin shook her head helplessly. I'm sorry. I don't have the power to— I do. The words came from Seraphine's mouth before she realized she was speaking. Everyone turned to stare at her. I don't know how I know, she continued, her hands trembling. But I can feel something inside me. Something that wants to help. Marin's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, child? Seraphine couldn't explain it. Ever since Kale had mentioned the moon goddess, since he'd touched her wrist this morning, something had been stirring in her chest. A warmth, a pressure, a power she'd never known she possessed. She knelt beside Tovin's ruined leg and placed her hands over the wound. Please, she prayed silently. Please let me help him. The warmth in her chest exploded outward, flooding down her arms and into her palms. Luminous energy burst from her hands, bright, pure, and impossible. Seraphine heard gasps around her, but she couldn't stop now. The light was pouring into Tovin's wound, knitting flesh, sealing vessels, doing what no mortal healing could do. When it was over, Seraphine collapsed backward, drained to her core. Tovin's leg was saved, scarred and weakened, but attached. Healing. What are you? Tovin's brother whispered. Seraphine looked down at her hands, still, faintly glowing with that impossible radiance. I don't know, she breathed. Marin crouched before her, taking her face in weathered hands. I know, the old healer said quietly. I've seen this only once before, in the old stories. You carry the moon goddess's blessing, child. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're a moon-touched. Before Seraphine could ask what that meant, a deafening roar shook the tent. Not human. Something primal, ancient, terrifying, and somehow impossibly familiar. She ran outside and stopped dead. The battlefield had transformed. Where there had been two armies locked in combat, now there was chaos of a different kind. The Southern soldiers were fleeing in terror from something that moved among them like death incarnate. A wolf. But not any wolf. A creature the size of a warhorse, with fur as black as midnight and eyes that blazed like molten gold. Kale, Seraphine realized with a shock that nearly stopped her heart. That's Kale. She watched him tear through enemy soldiers, watched other wolves join him. His warriors, she understood now, all of them capable of this impossible transformation. This was what he'd meant. My wolf recognized you. Seraphine's legs gave out beneath her as the full truth crashed over her. She hadn't been captured by raiders. She had been claimed by wolf shifters, and their king believed she was his fated mate. The battle ended at dusk. Seraphine stood at the edge of the healer's tent, watching the wolves return. One by one they crossed the blood-soaked field and shifted, bones cracking, fur receding, until men and women stood where beasts had been moments before. Naked, exhausted, but alive. She searched for the massive black wolf, her pulse thrumming against her ribs. Where is he? Where is Kale? Then the crowd parted. Kale walked through his people, still in human form, wearing only a cloak someone had thrown over his shoulders. Blood covered him, some his own, most belonging to enemies. His gaze swept the camp until it found her. The world narrowed to the space between them. He crossed the distance in long strides. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "You're alive," he said roughly. "So are you." His hand rose to her face, hovering just above her cheek, not quite touching. "They told me what you did." Tovin's leg? The light. His voice dropped. "They told me what Marin called you." "Moon touched," Seraphine whispered. "I don't know what it means." "It means the goddess has marked you." His eyes blazed with something fierce. "It means I was right." "Right about what?" "About you being mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat flooding through her veins. "I'm not anyone's property," she managed. "No." His hand finally made contact, cupping her jaw with devastating gentleness. "You're not property. You're my equal, my match, the other half of my soul that I've been searching for since I came of age." Seraphine's breath caught. "You don't even know me." "I know you prayed for freedom and received power instead. I know you stayed to help strangers when you could have fled." His thumb traced her lower lip. "And I know you feel this thing between us, even if you don't understand it yet." She did feel it. Fire in her blood, lightning in her bones. Every inch of her skin ached to press against his. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Yes, completely impossible." "Kale." A sharp voice shattered the moment. "We need you at the council tent, now." His eyes held hers for one more heartbeat, burning with promise. "This isn't over," he said quietly, "not even close." Then he was gone, leaving Seraphine trembling in the twilight. That night, Seraphine couldn't sleep. She lay in her tent, replaying every word Kale had spoken. "The other half of my soul." How could a stranger be her soul's match? But he didn't feel like a stranger. When he touched her, something ancient and instinctive recognized him. A rustling made her sit up. The flap parted, and a figure slipped inside. Not Kale, but Alara, the prisoner from the cage. Seraphine scrambled backward. "How did you—" "The battle chaos. Guards were needed elsewhere." Alara crept closer, desperation in her eyes. "You have to understand what they're not telling you." "Why should I trust a traitor? I'm a survivor." She gripped Seraphine's arm. "You think you're special to him? You think you're the first woman he's claimed as his fated mate?" Seraphine's blood went cold. "What?" "There was another. Isolde. Beautiful. Powerful. devoted to him completely. Ilara's voice dropped. She's dead now. The goddess rejected their bond. They say the cavern itself turned against her, burned her alive before they could complete the ritual. You're lying. Ask them about the claiming ritual. Ask what happens when the goddess decides a pairing is wrong. Ilara moved toward the exit. You're not his destiny, girl, you're his next victim. Run while you still can. She vanished, leaving Seraphine alone with poisonous doubt. Dawn found Seraphine marching to the council tent. She pushed through the entrance, ignoring the guards. Kale sat at the head of a long table surrounded by advisors. I need to speak with you. Alone. The council filed out reluctantly. When they were alone, Seraphine faced him. Tell me about Isolde. Kyle went very still. Where did you hear that name? Is it true? Was there another woman? Did she die? The silence stretched unbearably. Yes. Seraphine felt the word like a wound. And you didn't think to mention this? It wasn't the same. He ran a hand through his hair. Isolde was chosen by the elders, not my wolf. A political alliance. Neither of us felt the true bond. When the goddess saw the lie in our hearts, she rejected us the moment we entered the cavern. And Isolde died. I nearly died too. I survived because of my alpha bloodline. He took her hands. What I feel for you isn't politics. My wolf recognized you instantly. I would never force you into the ritual. The choice will always be yours. And if I choose to leave? Pain flickered across his face. Then I'll escort you to the border myself and spend the rest of my life knowing what I lost. The sincerity was undeniable. I need time, Seraphine said finally. Take all the time you need. He released her hands reluctantly. I've waited 30 years to find you. I can wait longer. 2 weeks passed since the battle, and the camp had finally begun to recover. Seraphine threw herself into learning everything she could about her new abilities. Old Marin became her teacher, guiding her through ancient texts that described the moon-touched. Mortals blessed by the goddess with the power to heal, to see truth, and in rare cases, to bridge the gap between human and wolf. The last moon-touch died 300 years ago, Marin explained one afternoon. Many believed the goddess had abandoned us. Your appearance is more significant than you realize. Significant how? There's a prophecy. Marin traced a line of faded text. When the wolves face extinction, she will come. Silver-eyed, goddess blessed, to heal the wounds of centuries and unite what was broken. Seraphine's stomach tightened. She had wanted escape from a forced marriage, not cosmic purpose. Yet she couldn't deny the rightness she felt when she healed. The power came easier now. She had saved 6 more warriors, mended bones, cured infections that should have been fatal. And always, she felt Kale's presence. He kept his distance, honoring his promise. But the bond between them had grown. She could sense his emotions now, faint echoes that whispered through her chest. When he was proud, she felt warmth. When he was lonely at night, she felt an ache so profound it brought tears to her eyes. The attack came without warning. Guards had relaxed. Patrols had thinned. The perfect moment for a stealthier strike. Seraphine was gathering herbs at the stream when something slammed into her from behind. She hit the ground hard and found herself staring up at Lord Malachar. There you are, he sneered. Ilara sent word of your location. The Southern King believes your blood holds the secret to destroying these beasts permanently. His hand closed around her throat. Be a good girl and come quietly. No. The power erupted without conscious thought. Malachar screamed as energy threw him backward, his hands blistering. Seraphine scrambled to her feet, radiance crackling around her. What are you? He gasped. Something you should never have touched. She ran toward the sounds of battle. The scene was chaos. Southern soldiers fighting wolves, strange black smoke rising from poisoned weapons that made shifters howl in agony. She saw Tovin go down, saw warriors collapse mid-shift as poison consumed them, and she saw Kale, fighting in wolf form, magnificent and terrible. But a poisoned spear caught his flank, and black corruption began spreading through his midnight fur. No, 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 no. Seraphine threw herself between him and the soldiers. The power that exploded from her was nothing like controlled healing. Raw and ancient, it knocked soldiers off their feet, purged poison from wounded wolves, and filled the camp with blinding radiance. When it faded, she collapsed. The last thing she saw was Kale's wolf limping toward her with anguished golden eyes. Seraphine woke in the sacred caves, the ancestral home of the wolf clans. "You nearly burned yourself out," Marin said. "Another minute and you would have died. You've been unconscious for 3 days. And Kale? Alive. But he refuses to leave your side, refuses to eat or sleep. His wolf has been unstable since the attack. Take me to him." They moved through winding stone passages lit by phosphorescent moss, deeper into the mountain's heart. Finally, they reached a vast cavern dominated by a pool of water that glowed with inner luminescence. Moonlight streamed through a crack in the ceiling far above. At the pool's edge sat a massive black wolf. He turned at their approach. His fur was matted, his eyes wild with grief. When he saw her, a sound escaped him, half whine, half howl, that echoed through the cavern. "He thought you were dying," Marin said quietly. "The bond let him feel your life force fading. It broke something in him." Seraphine released Marin's arm and walked toward him on unsteady legs. "Kale." He didn't shift back. Instead, he pressed his massive head against her stomach. Through the bond, she felt his emotions: relief, anguish, desperate love, and beneath it all, a fear so profound it stole her breath. Fear of losing her. Seraphine sank to her knees, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm alive. I'm not going anywhere." The wolf made that sound again, heartbreaking and raw. She held him tighter, feeling tears stream down her cheeks. In that moment, surrounded by ancient stone and sacred moonlight, Seraphine finally stopped fighting. She loved him. Gods help her, she loved this wolf king who had stolen her from a burning village and shown her a world she never knew existed. The bond wasn't a chain. It was a choice. Her choice. And she chose him. Dawn found them still by the sacred pool. Kale had shifted back to human form sometime during the night, and they had talked until their voices grew hoarse. He told her about his childhood, his mother's death, the weight of leadership thrust upon him too young. She told him about her father's debts, Malakar's cruelty, and the years of surviving rather than living. They shared wounds, and in sharing, began to heal them. Now they sat side by side, watching the moonlight fade from the pool as sunlight began to creep through the crack above. "The claiming ritual," Seraphine said quietly. "Tell me what it involves." Kyle tensed beside her. "You don't have to." "I want to know." He was silent for a long moment. "It happens here, in this cavern, under the full moon. We both enter the sacred pool, and the goddess judges our bond. If she accepts us, the mating marks appear, one on each of our bodies, mirror images of each other." His voice dropped. "If she rejects us, the pool turns to fire. The unworthy one burns." Seraphine absorbed this information. "And with Isolde? We never even made it to the pool. The rejection hit us the moment we entered the cavern." Pain flickered across his face. "The goddess knew our bond was false before we did. But ours is real." It wasn't a question. Kale turned to look at her, hope and fear warring in his eyes. "You believe that?" Seraphine took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I feel you in my chest, Kale. Every emotion, every heartbeat. When you were wounded in the battle, it felt like someone was carving pieces out of my soul." She brought his hand to her cheek. "I don't understand all of this yet. I may never understand it completely. but I know what I feel is real. Seraphine. Her name on his lips was a prayer. What are you saying? I'm saying yes. She smiled through the tears threatening to spill. I choose you. I choose this bond. I want to complete the claiming ritual. Kale's control shattered. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with desperate passion, years of loneliness and longing pouring through the contact. Seraphine kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his hair, her body pressing against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. The full moon is tonight, he said roughly. We don't have to rush. I don't want to wait. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I've spent my whole life waiting. For rescue, for freedom, for someone to decide my fate. I'm done waiting. I want to claim my destiny. Something fierce blazed in his expression. Then tonight, you become mine. Tonight, she agreed, we become each other's. The hours until moonrise passed in a blur of preparation. Marin helped Seraphine bathe in sacred oils that smelled of moonflower and cedar. She was dressed in a simple white gown that left her arms and feet bare, her silver eyes lined with dark kohl in the traditional style. You understand the risks, Marin said, as she arranged Seraphine's hair. I understand. And you choose this freely? No pressure? No coercion? Seraphine met the old healer's eyes in the polished bronze mirror. I choose this more freely than I've ever chosen anything in my life. Marin nodded slowly, something like peace settling over her weathered features. Then the goddess will smile on you. I'm certain of it. When darkness fell and the full moon began its ascent, Seraphine walked alone through the torch-lit passages to the sacred cavern. The path was lined with clan members, warriors, elders, children, all watching in respectful silence as she passed. She was not afraid. The cavern had transformed. Hundreds of candles floated on the sacred pool's surface, their flames reflecting off the water like earthbound stars. Moonlight poured through the crack above, stronger now than during the day, illuminating the space with ethereal radiance. Kale waited at the pool's edge. He wore nothing but loose white trousers, his scarred torso bare, the tribal markings of his bloodline visible on his arms and chest. When he saw her approaching, his breath caught audibly. You're beautiful, he said hoarsely. So are you. They met at the water's edge, hands finding each other automatically. Behind them, the clan gathered at the cavern's entrance, maintaining respectful distance. Are you ready? Kale asked. More than ready. Together, they stepped into the sacred pool. The water was warm, almost hot, and it seemed to glow brighter at their presence. They waded toward the center, where the moonlight fell most directly, until they stood chest-deep in the luminous water. Seraphine could feel the goddess's attention like a weight on her skin. Ancient, infinite, knowing. Kale took both her hands, facing her fully. I, Kale of the Silverclaw bloodline, Alpha King of the Northern clans, claim this woman as my fated mate. His voice rang through the cavern with absolute certainty. My wolf chose her. My heart chose her. My soul recognizes her as its missing half. I will protect her with my life, honor her with my devotion, and love her through every obstacle this world or the next presents. The water around them began to swirl, responding to his vow. Now it was her turn. Seraphine squeezed his hands, letting every wall she had built over years of survival crumble away. I, Seraphine of no great bloodline, daughter of no noble house, claim this man as my fated mate. Her voice shook but held strong. I came to him a prisoner and found myself freed. I came to him broken and found myself healed. His wolf called to something in my soul that I didn't know existed, and now I cannot imagine my life without him. Tears streamed down her face. I will stand beside him in peace and in war. I will give him my trust, my loyalty, and my love for as long as the goddess grants us breath. The moonlight intensified until it was almost blinding. Seraphine felt something building in the water around them, the goddess's judgment, preparing to fall. This was the moment. Accept or reject. Life or death. Please. She prayed silently. Please let this be real. Pain exploded through her shoulder blade. Seraphine cried out, but Kale caught her, held her upright as fire carved itself into her skin. Through their bond, she felt him experiencing the same agony, the same mark burning into his flesh. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pain stopped. The moonlight dimmed to its normal gentle glow. The water stilled. And when Seraphine looked at Kale's chest, she saw it. A mark directly over his heart, shaped like a crescent moon. Wrapped around a howling wolf, his hand found her shoulder blade, tracing the matching mark that now adorned her own skin. She accepted us, he breathed, wonder filling his voice. The goddess accepted us. Joy exploded through Seraphine, her own and his, magnified through the completed bond until she couldn't tell where her emotions ended and his began. They were no longer two separate souls. They were one. A howl rose from the cavern's entrance as Kale's wolf spirit sang its triumph. The clan took up the cry, dozens of voices raised in celebration that echoed off the ancient stones. But Seraphine barely heard them. She was too busy pulling her mate, into a kiss that said everything words could not. When they finally broke apart, Kale lifted her easily into his arms. "Where are we going?" she asked, laughing. "Away from here." His eyes blazed with possessive heat. "I have waited 30 years to find you, Seraphine. I intend to spend the rest of the night showing you exactly what that means." She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her lips to his ear. "Then stop talking and start showing." His growl of response vibrated through both their bodies. Behind them, the sacred pool glowed with the goddess's blessing as the Alpha King carried his moon-touched mate into their future together. 1 month later, the northern clans gathered for the coronation. Seraphine stood on the stone dais beside Kale, wearing robes of silver and white that matched the mark on her shoulder. Below them, thousands of faces looked up, warriors and healers, elders and children, wolves and humans united under one banner. 1 month ago, she had been a nameless ward, praying for escape from an unwanted marriage. Now she was a queen. The crown that settled on her head was wrought of silver and moonstone, delicate but strong. Kale's matching crown was darker, forged from the iron of ancient weapons, but their hands remained intertwined throughout the ceremony. "Can you believe this?" she asked through their bond. "Every day," he replied. "I believe it every time I wake up beside you." When the ritual words were spoken and the clan's allegiance pledged, Kale raised their joined hands to the sky. "I present to you Seraphine, moon-touched queen of the northern clans, blessed of the goddess, healer of wolves, and light of my soul." The roar that answered shook the mountains themselves. Later that night, standing on the balcony of their chambers in the mountain fortress, Seraphine looked up at the full moon and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered to the silver light. "I asked for freedom. You gave me something better. You gave me home." Arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her against a warm, solid chest. "Talking to the goddess again?" Kale murmured against her hair. "Thanking her." "For what?" Seraphine turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved, scarred, fierce, and unbearably tender when he looked at her. "For not giving me what I asked?" "For..." She rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "For giving me what I needed instead." Kale's arms tightened around her, and through their bond she felt his love, vast as the sky, deep as the mountain caves, eternal as the moon itself. She had begged the goddess for freedom. She had found something infinitely more precious. She had found where she belonged. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed Seraphine and Kale's story. If you'd like to listen on the go, All my stories are also available on Spotify under my channel name. You'll find the link in the description below. A big thank you to everyone who's subscribed. Your support truly means the world to me. Until next time.